Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, this was a busy weekend for news. Of course, we had the terrorist attacks in Paris. On Saturday, we had the Democrat debate. We're going to talk about what's going on in Paris with some new updates from our reporters who are there, as well as what is coming next in terms of the as they break down and destroy Western civilization. Right at Paris, they're going to rebuild a new foundation for a world government. That's what they're going to do with the climate treaty that they're coming at in just 2 weeks in Paris. But let's go to the Democrat debate first. We had an article that was at the top of the Drudge Report today talking about how Hillary Clinton is often confused. And they got this from emails that were obtained by Judicial Watch with a Freedom of Information Act request. In these emails, one in particular is an exchange going back and forth between Huma Abedin, the close confidant of Hillary Clinton, saying that Hillary is often confused. And in the context, they were talking about how, have you been going over her calls with her? So she knows that she has to see the Indian Prime Minister at 8. She's got a call with him. And then Hanley comes back to Huma Abedin and says, well, she was in bed for a nap by the time I heard she had an 8 a.m. call. I'll go over that with her. Huma Abedin said, it's very important to do that. She is often confused. And we're going to see in this debate just how confused she gets about things like gun statistics. But there's other things that came out of these emails with a FOIA request from Judicial Watch. They say the Clinton top aide attempted to obtain special treatment from the State Department for business associates and relatives. Huma, how could you? Then also, Huma Abedin received emails from her mother, who is a controversial Islamicist activist. So we're going to talk about the Wall Street cronyism that we see in these emails, where they're getting special treatment from the State Department for business associates and relatives. We're also going to talk about how Islamic activists cannot be named by the candidates during the debate. All this came out during the debate. Now, the debate itself had very disappointing ratings. They had lost 7 million viewers from the last Democrat debate, which had not achieved the kind of viewership the Republican Party debates had. It's down 45% in this second debate. And they say that it was unprecedented, unilateral, and arbitrary the way the DNC chair determined this schedule. These are complaints from her opponents, from Governor O'Malley's deputy campaign manager. She said, it's clear we need to open up the process. We need to have more debates. We need to engage more voters in this process. Well, you understand that the debate schedule was set up precisely to keep any of that stuff from happening. They don't want you to vet the candidates, particularly Hillary Clinton. They want to coronate her through without any opposition from any other Democrat candidates, and they don't want the public to see her. We're going to take a look at some of the things that came up in the debate, because although the debate itself and the election itself is a very manipulated, very dishonest process, the way they count the votes as well, it's still important to see how they lie and to call them out on their lies, to see how they believe that they can get away not only with lying, but also, as we know in the case of the Clintons, with murder. Now, they point out that the next debates are going to be even less watched, because the next one that's coming up is the Saturday night before Christmas. Then they're going to have the Sunday night of the Martin Luther King Day weekend, which is going to also be during NFL playoffs. So they're not expecting to see many people tuning in to watch this. They point out the obvious again. A Democrat campaign says, look, there was a clear intent to bury these debates to the benefit of Hillary Clinton. Yeah, you can't have people seeing her lie. And of course, they even turned off the debate. It was such a snooze fest. They turned it off with 7 minutes to spare. But let's look at some of the things that came out here. Clearly, I don't think that Hillary Clinton was confused on the gun statistics that she put out. I think she was just flat out lying. And they point out in the Huffington Post, they say, apparently, if you're a Democrat presidential candidate, there's no longer such a thing as being too strict about gun safety. They were all trying to out-gun control each other. And this was the day after, remember, we had 120 plus people die, showing the futility of gun control in France. And they want to give us exactly that same type of system. Take away your right of self-defense. And of course, look at the way the tactics on how they approach this argument. That's why it's important to take a look at the debates. You see their tactics. You see how they're going to try to sell this to the public. And you have an opportunity to push back against these lies and distortions. Clinton called Bernie Sanders' vote in favor of the 2005 Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act a terrible mistake. Now, what does this do? This would shield manufacturers, distributors, and sellers of guns and ammunition from civil lawsuits when others are seeking damages, injunctive, or other relief resulting from the misuse of their products by others. You understand? Listen to that phrase there. The misuse of their products by others. Now, it doesn't matter if this is guns or if it's cars or whatever it is, okay? If it's the misuse of somebody's products by other people, there is no negligence there. Clinton understands that. She's a lawyer. She knows what negligence is. You're not negligent if you sell something to somebody and then somebody misuses it in a way to harm other people. If somebody takes a car made by Chevy and drives it into a crowd of people in a terrorist attack, you shouldn't be able to sue Chevy. And the liberals will say, well, guns were only meant to kill people. No, they were also meant to defend people. And there are innumerable and uncounted times that people have defended themselves without having to fire a shot at anyone. The mere presence of firearms deters that kind of activity. Now, they go on from there and they say, well, Sanders says, I don't think there's a disagreement in this, and because he wants to make himself appear to be in support of taking down the Second Amendment. O'Malley said that as well. O'Malley said, well, Hillary, you've been on all three sides of this. You portrayed yourself as Annie Oakley in 2008. I seem to have missed that when she was portraying herself as Annie Oakley. But nevertheless, they say, when O'Malley was parading about that, Sanders came back to O'Malley and he says, I think it's fair to say Baltimore is not now one of the safest cities in America. Well, of course it isn't. Anywhere where you enact rigid gun control, you are going to have more crime. We have seen that as a pattern. It's a very obvious pattern. Now, let's take a look at what she actually said, though. Here's the amazing thing that Hillary Clinton said. She said, since we last debated in Las Vegas, nearly 3,000 people have been killed by guns. Total lie. 200 children. Total lie. 21 mass shootings. Total lie. With 3 people killed. Total lie. Everything about that was a total lie. AP points that out in their fact check. And as a matter of fact, there weren't 21 mass shootings. There was 1 mass shooting, and that's the one she's talking about in Des Moines. And there weren't 3 people killed. There was 1 person killed. But let's take a look at the special treatment from State Department and business associates and realtors. Remember that was talked about in the email? Does that really happen? You know, Bernie Sanders was talking about how candidates are influenced when they take money. He says, yeah, everybody says they're not influenced by this when they take the money, but nevertheless, let's play this clip and see how Hillary reacts.
I represented New York, and I represented New York on 9/11. When we were attacked, where were we attacked? We were attacked in downtown Manhattan, where Wall Street is. I did spend a whole lot of time and effort helping them rebuild. That was good for New York, it was good for the economy, and it was a way to rebuke the terrorists who had attacked our country.
Well, he's talking about corruption. He's talking about people involved in crony capitalism, and Hillary immediately thinks he's talking about her. Why would she think that? She immediately says, essentially, I resemble that remark, and here's what she has to say.
John, wait a minute, wait a minute.
Personal
Look,
privilege.
He has basically used his answer to impugn my integrity. Let's be frank here. Oh, wait a minute, Senator. You know, not only do I have hundreds of thousands of donors, most of them small, and I'm very proud that for the first time, a majority of my donors are women, 60%.
Amazing, isn't it? She says she took the money from Wall Street so she could rebuke the terrorists of 9/11. No, you know what? Hillary wasn't representing the people of New York. She was representing Wall Street. And that's one of the most amazing pushbacks of people who are on the payroll of big money I've ever seen. Then they went from this and they said, well, who's a populist? And Bernie Sanders wanted to point out where he got his money from. Here's what he had to say.
This campaign contribution will not influence me. I'm going to be independent. Well, why do they make millions of dollars of campaign contributions? They expect to get something. Everybody knows that.
Now understand what's going on. Bernie is talking about how he gets his money from small donors like Ron Paul did, like Rand Paul and other candidates do. He says, we got $750,000 at $30 a piece. He said, that's who I'm indebted to. And hear the way that Hillary spins that. She says, well, I have a lot of women who support me. I have 100,000 women who have supported me. Well, that doesn't say anything. That's not a response. Does she have more women sending her money than Bernie Sanders does? Does she get more money from women than she does from Wall Street? And, you know, that doesn't even have any influence as to where does the money come from small donors? Well, AP looked at it in terms of fact checks. They pointed out that if you look at small donors, people who have given less than $200, Hillary's donors, that's only 17% of her donations, 17%. But Sanders, it accounts for 74%. So if you're looking at who the small donors are supporting, it's like 80% of the money of Bernie Sanders is coming from small donors, but only 28% of Hillary Clinton's donors. So they got the 80-20 rule exactly upside down. So yes, she is the candidate of big money. He does have smaller donors who are giving him money. Understand, too, that Hillary Clinton has just one super PAC alone that is expected to give her more than $100 million. She has 7 donors at least who have given her $1 million each. So if she's got 100,000 female donors that she points out, and of course it's only important if they're women, somehow that makes it more important. I'm a woman, I've got females who are giving me money. Well, let's say she has 100,000 women who are giving her $50, okay? That's $5 million, and that's not as much as 7 of these fat cats on Wall Street gave her. Then they go to who's a real socialist, and they asked Bernie Sanders, how high would you go on tax rates, Bernie, for all these programs that you want to do, all these giveaways? And he says this.
Well, let's get specific. How high would you go? You've said before you'd go above 50%. How high?
We haven't come up with an exact number yet, but it will not be as high as the number under Dwight D. Eisenhower, which was 90%, but it will be. I'm not that much of a socialist compared to Eisenhower.
So isn't that amazing? He says, well, I don't really know yet. I haven't come up with the numbers yet. Just typical socialist, isn't it? They have no idea how much this is going to cost. They just promise people the world. But then he comes back and he said something very amazing. He says, oh, it'll probably be less than 90% because I'm not as much of a socialist as Eisenhower. Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at the data as to the data rates. And of course, O'Malley chimed in and said, well, Ronald Reagan, he had 70% tax rates. That's an outright lie as well. And of course, CBS and AP let him get away with that. Because you have to understand that when you look at these rates, what were the rates when somebody came into office and what were the rates when they came out? Who's the real socialist? Was it Eisenhower? Was it Reagan? Was it maybe FDR, the hero of all the socialists? Let's take a look at the minimum rates when FDR started and when he ended, okay? When he began, there was a 4% rate that kicked in at $70,000. And these are all figures that are adjusted to 2013. So these are constant dollars. This is in 2013 dollars. And this is for married filing jointly. So 4% and $70,000 when FDR comes in. That's the minimum rates that are there. What he did was he raised that 4% to 24%, and he had it kick in at $24,000. And they created an incredible number of rates there as well. But let's look at the other minimum rates. Now, when Eisenhower started in 1953, the rate had gone down slightly to 22%. And they had dropped the starting rate for that down to $17,000. At the end of his administration, 1961, the rate was about the same, but they had increased it a little bit in terms of where that rate was going to kick in. You had to get to 30.7 thousand before that 20% rate came in. Now, when Reagan started in 1981, there was a 0% tax rate until you got to $8,000 a year. And then when he ended, that rate was 15%, but they raised the level up to 57%. So even though he raised the rate for people who are making less than $8,000, it had a huge effect on the middle class. We'll take a look at that again. But let's first look at the maximum rates, because that's the 90% rate that he was talking about. When FDR started in 1933, the maximum rate was 63%, and you had to have an income of $17.5 million to get 63%. But at the end in 1945, FDR had raised the rates to 94%, and he had lowered it to $2.5 million. Still pretty high income rate. That essentially stayed with Eisenhower. It was 92% when he began and 91% when it ended. And again, they raised that bracket a little bit from 1.7 million to 3 million. When Reagan began, it was a 70% tax racket at the beginning of $500,000, okay? Now, they lowered that to 28% for everybody making $57,000 and above. Understand that when you look at these brackets, and this is what we need to understand, FDR went from 55 brackets when he took office to 24, and he raised taxes considerably, especially at the higher end. Eisenhower kept those same 24 brackets and had about the same distribution in terms of tax rates. Reagan, however, had 16 brackets when he took office, and when he finished, he had 2 brackets. If you made less than $57,000, you had a 15% tax bracket. If you made more than $57,000, you had a 28% tax bracket. A huge decrease in taxes, and we can see this if we look at the median family tax rate. Look at what the median family is making. And again, this is in current dollars, $51.9 thousand. Under FDR, he taxed the families. There was 4% when he came in, but he raised it to 29%. Good socialist, isn't he? Reagan dropped them from 28% to 15% for the median family income. And the reality is that the rates that you attribute to somebody like Reagan, as O'Malley said, they were 70%. That's what he began with. He ended with the highest rate of 28%. Only two brackets, either 15% or 28%. And the median family income was in that lower bracket. So I want to go back and take a look real quickly before we move on. Who is the socialist? Who raised taxes most on the people who had a median family income? Today, again, in today's dollars, $51,900. If we look at FDR, he started in 1933 with a 4% tax rate on the median family home and ended up with a 29% tax rate. Huge tax increase. And understand that FDR also introduced Social Security. Incredibly regressive taxes for those of you who want to call yourself progressives. The people who are making less than $100,000 pay all of those taxes, and it's a 15% tax on their cost to the employer. They only see half of it come out of their paycheck. That's the other part of the lies underlying socialism. Now, Eisenhower, he began with a tax on the family, the median family, of 34%, but he ended with a 22% tax rate on that family. Again, taxes went down under Eisenhower. Not a socialist, Bernie, not a socialist, 34% to 22%. Reagan, he began with a 28% tax. That's what he inherited, a 28% tax on the median family income, and he ended up with a 15% tax on the median family income. Cut it in half. There you go. That's the real socialism. Let's take a look, too, at Nicaragua. You know, Bernie Sanders loves the Nicaraguan people. Remember that tape that came out in 1985? I call him Bernie Sandernista because he loved Daniel Ortega so much. Well, it's the Nicaraguans now are telling Cubans that they can't migrate into their country. Not even if they're on their way to America for the pot of gold. No, you can't pass through communist, socialist Nicaragua. They say Nicaragua dispatched its military and its police to help close its border as a dispute with Costa Rica over Cuban migrants fueled tensions between the two nations. They're ready to go to war with Costa Rica because Costa Rica is allowing Cuban migrants to pass through their country and into Nicaragua on their way to America to get the free goodies. Costa Rica decided to grant 7-day transit visas to 1,100 Cuban migrants. And then the Nicaraguans said, that violates our national sovereignty. National sovereignty, imagine that. that antiquated notion. The Nicaraguan government then said that they would use troops and riot police, and they launched tear gas at the people attempting to enter their country on Sunday. The number of Cubans seeking to migrate to the U.S. has spiked since the two countries began working in December of last year to normalize relations after more than 5 decades. 28,000 Cubans have entered the U.S., and they say the Cuban migrants have historically used Central America as a land bridge to the United States. Again, Bernie Sanders, who wants open borders, Bernie Sanders, who thinks that the Nicaraguan Sandinistas, and again, we've talked about how Daniel Ortega was nothing but a kleptocrat thrown out by a coalition of conservatives and communists. He was nothing but a common thief. You want to talk about crony capitalists? You want to understand how real socialism works? Take a look at Nicaragua, the idols of Bernie Sanders.
Shane Steiner's involvement with InfoWarsLife.com truly happened in an organic way. I went to high school with Shane, his brother, knew his parents well, and he was visiting the office once, hadn't been to the office in years, and said, wow, I notice you're making and selling supplements. Do these really work? Because I've tried a lot of supplements as a workout enthusiast, and I really think most of them are hype. And I said, here, take some home, try it. Well, a few weeks later, he came in blown away and said, I want to buy 3 boxes of this stuff to give my friends and family. It's simply amazing. He said, why does it work so well? And I said, listen, go to InfoWarsLife.com, watch the informational videos with Dr. Group and others. They understand how it all works. I know that it works for me. That's all I understand. The science, the facts, the research, people's testimonials, they're all on InfoWarsLife.com. You can check it out for yourself.
I wanted to go to the gym. I wanted to push myself and work out harder. And that led to me being able to come out and do stuff like the barefooting and the surfing and stuff like that, which I've never done. I never would have done that 2 years ago.
Shane has said over and over again, more than just libido and energy, it made him want to get into the gym more. It made him want to get in better shape. And believe me, the Steiners have amazing genetics. His brother is a world champion steer wrestler. His dad, Bobby Steiner, is a famous world champion bull rider. They've got natural genetics. But when you added this to the mix, in Shane's own words, it took him to the next level. Shane noticed the mental clarity. Bobby was able to work out longer and gain muscle mass. He's already completely shredded. I gotta admit, for me, the biggest effect has been libido. Now, I've never claimed to have a body like some beach model, but back when I was 20, 22 years old and worked out every day, I looked great. But over the years, and being married, having 3 kids, and working 18 hours a day, I gained basically 100 pounds. And it's been a long process losing that weight in the last 4 years. But if you look at the photos and the videos of what I looked like 4 or 5 years ago versus today, the results are dramatic. I'd already cleaned up my diet, I was working out hard, but I'd only lost about 20 pounds. It was adding the other key ingredients from InfoWarsLife.com that helped me personally go to the next level and shed another 35 pounds.
This has actually made me feel so good that here lately, about a year ago, I started training jiu-jitsu, and that kind of led to doing some boxing and kickboxing. I mean, it's amazing that 2 years ago, I was on the couch and couldn't even tie my shoes, and now I'm training with MMA fighters and just doing stuff that I never thought that I would be doing ever again. So Super Male Vitality has allowed me to do some amazing things, and if it has those kind of effects for me, I know that it will do great things for you. So just try Super Male Vitality. I promise you, you'll love it.
And finally, let's look at Anthony Gucciardi, Infowars.com reporter. He also works with Dr. Group and others, helping develop the newest, most cutting-edge, high-quality supplements. Let's take a look at what happened when he tried to barefoot ski for the first time with the Steiners. And remember, we're not making fun of him. He had the will to get in the arena, and he's lost more than 10 pounds in the last few years of fat and gained more than 10 pounds of muscle. And Anthony chalks it up to Super Male Vitality as well. Bottom line, folks, you want to discover the power of Super Male Vitality and Super Female Vitality for yourself by visiting InfoWarsLife.com today or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.